Good morning. This is Faith. Welcome to Catholic Unschooling Coach. I think that's what I call this channel. It's about 6:30 in the morning, and I'm just trying to put content up on this YouTube channel. It's hard having two YouTube channels. It takes more time than you think it will. But I just thought I would talk about, and this will be an ongoing thing, I think, about how I changed from a curriculum junkie to a curriculum minimalist over the course of my homeschooling years. When I first started out, because of insecurity, I kept trying different programs that were offered. It takes a while to shift your thinking from really believing that children need curriculum to learn, and then sort of just trusting in the fact that children are natural born learners. And in fact, I came to believe this very deeply, and I think it's more in line with God's plan than the worldly scope and sequence that is forced on children that has very little respect for their development as human beings. But it took a while to change. And when I first started, I was a real curriculum junkie. I loved those catalogs. I still like the catalogs. And I would sit and pour through them, and then I would plan. I would spend all summer planning, to the point where I kind of neglected my kids. To the point where I would burn myself out almost before the school year started. And then when September would roll along, we would start, and I would take all the nice ideas that everyone had. Have ice cream, make the first day fun. Gradually implement each subject. All those kind of words of advice, and I would try. And it was always extremely painful, but we would just sort of soldier on. And we would soldier on through September, and then I would start to fade in October, and then we would limp through till Thanksgiving about, and then it would just drop, and Christmas would be coming, and I did not. Christmas is a really hard time of the year for me. It's because I'm a child of an alcoholic, and Christmas is always an especially painful time in my childhood. And so I think I've never recovered. Those are my chickens. I've never recovered psychologically. I probably need deep psychoanalysis. So Christmas is always a burden to me. And I also sort of reject it spiritually because it's become so commercial and so materialistic and so far removed from what it's supposed to be. I always want it to be like this quiet, deep, intense, time of contemplation of the whole incarnation, right? And that's not what it is. And also I come from a really big family, and we would take turns hosting a huge Christmas party. I mean, 40, 60 people for the extended family. And I had a house that could accommodate it. And so both houses that I've owned. But I'm a horrible housekeeper, so things would have gotten so cluttered and junky and gross. And I would have to take off December and clean my house so I could host this party every couple of years. So I sort of got into the rhythm that December meant cleaning, which probably made Christmas even worse in my mind, since I'm not good at that kind of thing. And then January, I would be totally spent because I was burnt out from trying to do school at home in September, October, and some of November. And then I was burnt out from Christmas. And January is when we'd really unschool because I just couldn't muster up the energy. And we would just read aloud, and we would run off of what we got for Christmas, because we always got a science kit and some sort of craft kit, and maybe we got some movies, and I always gave them the Jim Weiss audio stories or books in their stockings, so we would be listening to those, and I would get a ton of books out of the library, and we would just read aloud and play our new games and work on our new kits and listen to our new audiobooks. And you know what? It was fine. Everybody was learning. And I wouldn't get my act together again Well, I always, and Easter is the opposite of Christmas for me. I love Easter, and I love Lent. And my kids would get really into Lent. And so Lent would come along, and we'd be like, suddenly we could refocus, and it had this spiritual element to it. And then as Easter loomed, and then after Easter, I would realize that I would need an end of year, either a teacher's evaluation or a standard test, because that's what I have to do for my state. I would go get those workbooks, the spectrum work, the test prep books, and we would just casually go through those, in very short lessons, just do a little bit of math here, maybe a little bit of, punctuation there. And then we would take the test, and the kids would all do just fine. Even though I'd been so sloppy and hit or miss, it was fine. And then summer, my husband would joke that I'd spend all the money that I didn't spend on sending them to Catholic school, sending them to camps. And they would do, fun camps, some were more fun than others. But we would do a lot of camps in the summer that would sort of be like their typical school socialization kind of experience. They'd have it in the summer rather than during the school year. And so that's how I did it. Until finally I realized that the whole thing of starting September with these programs that we would only ever do halfway or a quarter of, it was such a waste of money. And over the years, I've given away so much curriculum. I still have so much junk. It's so dismaying that I just spent all this money. I could have fed a village in Africa with the money I wasted because I was insecure, and I was always looking for the silver bullet that was going to make my homeschool really, really easy. And there is no such animal. There's no such thing. And it finally dawned on me that there was really no such thing. Because the whole time I was going through this, I was realizing my kids were always learning. They were always learning. Were they learning what I wanted them to learn according to some scope and sequence someone had come up with? No, not always, though sometimes there was overlap. But they were learning. They had a rich learning life in spite of me, right? Not because of me, but in spite of me. So I learned to stop focusing so much on curriculum, and instead I went to resources. What are resources that I could put out there that would support them when they had a question, or when they stumbled upon a need for a skill, or if they wanted to hone something that they knew, or answered their curiosity, or whatever. I wanted to make that available to them. But I didn't like curriculum because everything's grade level, right? And that's very limiting. That's a very narrow way to approach learning. It makes it boring. So instead, I moved to resources. So ungraded resources that you could just pull off the shelf and use, or often I would strew them. I would just stick them on the coffee table, and the kids would pick them up, or maybe I would pick them up when we were sitting around at breakfast or something and read a little bit from them, and then put them on the coffee table so that they would know what it was. So I'm just going to show you some of those things that I use. So this is my favorite learning to read program. It's Phonics Pathways. And what I really used it for, though, was spelling. My kids were dyslexic. They were, diagnosed, or at least a few of them. And so I found this a really great resource. I learned about it from The Well-Trained Mind. I gave away my first edition. This is the second edition that I got just to have, and now I'm going to use it with a 4-year-old. But I really love this approach. It's not graded. Anybody can pick it up and learn to read from it. And my kids were late readers because of their learning disabilities. And what was really good about it was I used it for spelling. And our spelling program, no spelling program worked for my kids at all. It made it absolutely something just so tearful, and they didn't get anything from it. But this really helped, because what I would do is I would take a particular spelling pattern or rule, and I would type up my own version of it and stick it up on my kitchen wall by where we ate, by our kitchen table. And then my kids did do copy work. That was the one thing I insisted on, that we just do about 10-20 minutes of copy work every morning after breakfast. And we would pull from well, I'll show you some things we pulled from, or at least one thing. Books we were reading, poems they liked, jokes they liked, prayers, Latin quotes, all sorts of things we pulled from. Sometimes they would just have a regular penmanship book. It depended on the year and what age they were and what they wanted. But anyway, they would make the connections themselves, because if every week or every other week, I wouldn't remember to change it every week, they saw a spelling rule up on the wall, and I would mention it really briefly at a meal. Just really brief. Brief was good. Less is more, I think, in unschooling. Then they would notice it when they were copying over. They would notice, oh look, CH words, and they would get it that way. And they were making the connection. I wasn't trying to make the connection for them, and it stuck more. So and now some of my kids are good spellers and some of them aren't. But you know what? You can go to school and be a bad speller too. So I don't think that is a judgment on homeschooling or unschooling, because there's plenty of bad spellers out there in the world. So anyway, so this was the resource, the ungraded resource that I really liked for learning to read and spelling. This is all language arts stuff. Then when we got to high school, I really enjoyed using this. It's a classical English rhetoric. And it's just got great quotes, and it talks about all these literary devices. They all have these Greek names. And it's great. G.K. Chesterton is in here a lot. Churchill, Milton, Disraeli, Burke, Shakespeare, Keats, Emerson, lots of Chesterton in here. Yeah, so it's really Poe. I mean, it's a great resource. It introduces your kids to many different authors, and they learn speaking, they learn literary devices, they learn grammar, just everything that's rich in language is in this book, and you just do it a few minutes a morning, and you get so much. That's what I really liked about stuff like this, is that you got a lot of bang for your buck. You learn so much in just a few minutes. It was very efficient, so you could learn really quickly and then just go off and do what you wanted. Let me take a sip because I'm going to cough. I notice I really cough a lot. I think I have allergies as I've gotten older. Anyway, other things. This was a fun book to strew. I just bought this at a used book sale, I think for like 10 cents or something. But that's a really fun way to learn about language, all these colloquialisms and sayings to make a federal case out of something, mad as a hatter, those kinds of things. It gives you the background of how those sayings came about. That's really fun. And these were other things that I tended to strew for my high schoolers, or I would just read out. I remember I read this out. Like every morning we learned a new word, 100 words. And look, it takes you 2 seconds. You just read that. And that's it. That's all. But, that eventually you learn a lot of rich language. This is another fun one, How Not to Write. You can really quarrel with his opinions on things, but this was something that I remember, especially my oldest son, enjoyed this book. This is another one, Figures of Speech. So this one, I don't know if we delved into this one quite so much. But anyway, those are the types of things that I would strew, or I would just sort of gently introduce by reading out loud for just a few minutes. And yet, it all works together, and it creates this rich atmosphere in your home where your kids are absorbing all this language. They're learning how to speak, they're learning how to write, they're learning how to communicate, they're learning a bit of history, and it all works, and you don't need to sit and do busy work and spend all this money on curriculum. You can spend 10 cents on a book like that, right? And that's really rich. So anyway, over the years, and again, this has got too long. I'm really sorry that I talk so much. I think these topics are just so rich that it's hard to make them short, but it's really hard to upload long videos. So anyway, I will try to upload this at some point today. And I'm trying to put content on the channel now because I'm going to take next week off. So anyway, I hope you appreciate this, and I will talk to you soon, hopefully. And God bless. Bye.